George Floyd's death is not the first time a Minneapolis police officer kneeling on a suspect's neck played a role in someone's death. And as KARE 11 investigative reporter A.J. Legault discovered, the last time it happened, there was supposed to be reform.
I can't breathe.
I can't breathe. George Floyd's haunting words before his death as an officer kneels on top of him and citizens beg for his vital signs to be checked.
Bro, does he have a pulse? No, bro, look at him. He's not responsive right now.
It's not Minneapolis's first in-custody death tied to officers kneeling on a person.
That's exactly what happened in the Smith case. And, David Smith died as a result.
Jack Ryan, a 20-year officer in Rhode Island, served as an expert witness in the police misconduct case resulting from the 2010 death of David Smith. The 28-year-old mentally ill man died following a struggle with officers inside the downtown YMCA.
Do you see similarities between this and the other case you were involved in here in Minnesota?
Well, I do. I see a similarity in the length of time and staying on top of after restraint's accomplished.
Video from the Smith case showed officers pinned Smith face down with a knee in his back for about 4 minutes. It's a highly controversial technique known as prone restraint, which Smith's family attorney, Robert Bennett, said made it impossible for him to breathe.
It's a complete failure of training and policy when the officers do that, and it's a violation of the Fourth Amendment.
Smith's autopsy shows he died due to mechanical asphyxia caused by prone restraint. The city paid out $3 million for his death.
The officers that when you watch these tapes over and over again, just don't get it that the person isn't breathing.
KARE 11 investigates last year as we research so-called prone restraint deaths around the country where officers pinned and held suspects face down. The Department of Justice has warned against it since the mid-90s, instructing as soon as the suspect is handcuffed, get him off his stomach. Bennett called kneeling on a face-down suspect a killing mechanism.
A killing mechanism on a human being?
Yeah.
That's what it is?
It is. It's really no different than strangling somebody.
All of the training says, get off them as quickly as you can. Move them into a position that facilitates breathing.
As part of the 2013 settlement in the Smith case, Minneapolis officers were supposed to receive additional training on how to properly restrain suspects.
And it was my belief that Minneapolis was going to do retraining on that issue. I don't know if that ever happened or not.
In light of what the video shows happening to George Floyd, KARE 11 asked Minneapolis police if that retraining took place. So far, we've not gotten a response. For KARE 11 Investigates, I'm A.J. Legault.
And even when we asked them, they still didn't respond.
Tonight, a family demanding answers to questions first raised in a KARE 11 investigation. They want to know if the Minneapolis Police Department actually kept its promise to better train officers after their loved one, like George Floyd, died from being kneeled on. Investigative reporter A.J. Legault has our continuing coverage, and we do want to warn you, this report contains violent images.
The name George Floyd has become an international rallying cry against law enforcement abuses and inappropriate use of force. For Angela Smith,
it was unbelievable.
I can't breathe.
The video of Minneapolis officers kneeling on a black man while his life ebbed away was something she never expected to see again. She thought her family's story had made a difference.
But we really didn't. We didn't make a difference. Because if we did, George Floyd would still be alive.
To understand that weight Angela carries, you have to know about her younger brother. 28-year-old David Smith loved poetry and acting. He was diagnosed as bipolar in college, but his family says he did not let it define him and was living a happy, productive life.
He was amazing, and he meant so much to us.
David committed no crime, but his behavior at the downtown YMCA in 2010 raised red flags for staff, and the police were called. It escalated to a struggle, ending with officers kneeling on David's back for about 4 minutes.
I don't think he's breathing.
Smith's autopsy shows he died due to mechanical asphyxia caused by prone restraint being held down with weight on his back. This 2003 training video from the NYPD shows that the risk of prolonged kneeling on a person
Occasionally, there are fatalities.
has been known to law enforcement for decades.
Persons on their stomachs can't breathe with pressure applied to their backs. As soon as suspects are handcuffed, get them off their stomachs, turn them on their sides, or sit them up.
When David's family settled their multi-million-dollar wrongful death lawsuit, part of this agreement said the city would require its sworn police officers to undergo training on positional asphyxia in 2014. The Smiths thought this would prevent another family from suffering as they had.
And so when we saw George Floyd die, and we saw him cry out for his mom in his last moments of his life, and we saw people on the video standing by and nobody did anything to stop it, my heart broke. It's like my brother died all over again.
Immediately after George Floyd's homicide, KARE 11 asked MPD if the training mandated in the Smith settlement actually happened. We got no response. Since then, in a press conference, Minneapolis's police chief gave a non-answer.
But in terms of Mr. Smith's family, we will obviously look at our training and continue to look at it.
You guys are asking questions now going, what happened to this promised training?
Yes. Yes, what happened to it?
Angela says if MPD truly trained its officers as promised in court, George Floyd's daughter would still have her dad.
George Floyd would still be alive. If they enforced what they said they would do, he would not be dead. The world would not be grieving the way that we are.
For KARE 11 Investigates, I'm AJ Legault.
This was murder. It wasn't a lack of training. A powerful statement from Minneapolis Police Chief Medaria Arredondo following a KARE 11 investigation. After weeks of delays, the city of Minneapolis has released information about whether they followed through with promised police training on the dangers of placing a person face down and kneeling on them.
If they enforced what they said they would do, he would not be dead. The world would not be grieving the way that we are.
Frustration, anger, pain mixed together last week in the voice of Angela Smith.
George Floyd!
A decade before George Floyd was killed, Angela's brother, David, died after a Minneapolis officer put a knee on his back for nearly 4 minutes, cutting off his air supply.
I don't think he's breathing.
An autopsy found Smith died due to mechanical asphyxia caused by prone restraint, being held face down with weight on his back. His family sued, leading to one of the largest lawsuit payouts for police misconduct in Minneapolis's history. But David's sister said they wanted something far more important than money.
When David was killed, we wanted to make sure this never happened to anybody else.
The family insisted in this settlement agreement that in 2014, the city would require its sworn police officers to undergo training on positional asphyxia. That's the danger of holding someone face down with pressure for a prolonged period.
You guys are asking questions now going, what happened to this promised training?
Yes. Yes, what happened to it? And even when we asked them, they still didn't respond.
As a commissioner and a member of the public, I just want to know if this training was ever completed.
Attorney Abigail Sarah is a commissioner on the Police Conduct Oversight Commission. On Monday, she told us she too had been asking questions for weeks about the training mandated after Smith's death.
I haven't received any sort of substantive response.
Sarah says the Oversight Commission even scheduled an emergency hearing for next week.
But late last night, the police department finally released new information about the training provided after the Smith settlement.
In this statement, Chief Arredondo says, I can confirm that MPD fulfilled the training requirement, that it was given to all officers, and I can confirm that Chauvin and Tao had this training. That's no small point and will likely be a key piece of evidence when the officers go on trial for murder. MPD's chief adds, the officers knew what was happening, one intentionally caused it, and the others failed to prevent it. This was murder. It wasn't a lack of training. For the Smith family, this means David's death, in fact, made a difference and will play a probable role in the Floyd family's pursuit of justice.
He loved Minnesota. Sadly enough, he loved it.
For KARE 11 Investigates, I'm AJ Legault.
If you would like to read the police chief's full statement, you can check out this story on KARE11.com.
Well, images like this, police using tear gas or rubber bullets to enforce order during the recent protests and riots, have become a symbol of the unrest following George Floyd's death. Tonight, KARE 11 investigates the dangers of those types of weapons. Our AJ Legault looks into what the state doesn't want you to know. And a warning, this report contains violent images.
Scenes from the seething streets of the Twin Cities in the wake of George Floyd's death as law enforcement attempted to quell unrest.
Rubber bullet, I'm assuming. They shot you.
And enforce curfews.
This what y'all shooting us with?
Often firing what are known as less lethal weapons.
I could feel the warm blood roll down my face.
Bleeding, bruised, a broken bone in her face. 21-year-old college student Grace spent Saturday night, May 30th, in the basement of a Minneapolis home being cared for by volunteer medics.
By the grace of God, it just happened to be medics there who helped me stop my bleeding and kept me there until 6 a.m. when it was safe to go out again.
She says she'd peacefully attended a protest outside 5th Precinct and left before 8 p.m. knowing the curfew started that night. But Grace, who asked we not use her last name, says after curfew, she and her boyfriend, a United States Marine reservist, were still walking to their car all alone on a side street when officers appeared and, with no warning...
It felt like I got punched in the face by the Hulk. It really did. And he yelled at them and said, "Don't shoot. You shot her in the face. Don't shoot."
She'd been hit by a less lethal round, but a round nonetheless able to maim, blind, and even kill.
The use of this kind of weapon is incredibly dangerous.
Dr. Rohini Har is an emergency medicine physician in Oakland, California. She co-authored this 2017 study, which looked at 1,984 people worldwide who saw doctors after being hit with all types of less lethal projectiles. 3% died, 15% were permanently injured.
Especially when they're misused or fired directly at people's head or face. That's when you see a lot of permanent disabilities and death.
To find out if they were misused, KARE 11 wanted to know exactly which less lethal munitions have been used during the George Floyd protests. St. Paul and Minneapolis readily made that information public. But State Patrol...
Get inside! Get in your house now! Let's go!
Responsible for scenes like this.
Light 'em up!
Targeting people standing on their own porch.
Get in the house!
Claims the public doesn't have the right to know what they fired at citizens, writing to KARE 11 that it could jeopardize the best interests of public safety. I personally watched State Patrol fire this round at a car and others like it at people, often with no warning when their only obvious legal infraction at the time was being out past curfew. It's in the same category of munitions St. Paul and Minneapolis use. A website for the manufacturer describes it as a 40-millimeter crushable foam round. It comes with a warning that it can expose you to chemicals known to cause cancer and birth defects. When fired, it travels 295 feet per second. That's 201 miles per hour.
It can break bones in the face. They can often penetrate the eye and go either lodge in the brain or at least cause permanent vision loss.
According to this lawsuit filed by the ACLU, that's in fact just what happened to this press photographer while covering the Minneapolis protests. The lawsuit alleges unforewarned, indiscriminate use of riot control tactics. Minneapolis PD's use of force manual states 40-millimeter launchers are to be used for the incapacitation of an aggressive, non-compliant subject, and unless deadly force is justified, officers should avoid the delivery of 40-millimeter impact projectiles to the head, neck, throat, and chest.
I strongly believe that they were aiming for our heads.
Were you rioting? Were you committing a crime at the time?
No, sir. We were walking home.
Grace, recovering from her injuries, questions why officers use such dangerous force when her only legal infraction was being out past curfew.
And it doesn't justify the fact that I got shot at in the face. They could have arrested me. They could have fined me.
For KARE 11 Investigates, I'm AJ Legault.
Well, this week, a judge approved a proposed court order filed by the Minnesota Department of Human Rights requiring MPD to make immediate changes. Part of that order says only the police chief or a designated deputy chief may approve the use of crowd control weapons, including rubber bullets and marking rounds during protests and demonstrations. And earlier today, the journalist blinded in one eye filed a lawsuit against the city and the state seeking damages.
Our KARE 11 Investigates team has been looking into use of force by Minneapolis police officers. And as AJ Legault reports, black people are much more likely to be subjected to it than white people.
Oh, he's not resisting arrest or nothing.
The death of George Floyd put the eyes of the nation on how Minneapolis polices its black residents.
Something was systemic in the police departments.
Keith Mays is a professor of African American Studies at the University of Minnesota.
This is what we always believed and thought, but we didn't have the numbers to back them up.
The numbers he's talking about come from KARE 11's analysis of use of force data, straight off the city's website. The key finding? Enormous disparity. Though only about 20% of Minneapolis residents are black, they make up 62% of use of force cases, compared to 24% white over the past 10 years. The disparity gets even wider when police use neck restraints.
66% to 24%. So just think about that disparity.
It says that we have a pretty much broken system.
Attorney Robert Bennett has brought a number of lawsuits against MPD for use of force violations and says the frequency with which officers use force against black residents helps explain the seething anger that sparked unrest after Mr. Floyd's death.
Well, in terms of police misconduct, Minneapolis punches way above its weight. It's in the heavyweight class, and it's not that big a city.
Now the world is seeing, has been borne out by these statistics, and so I'm so glad to see that we are taking a deeper dive into these numbers.
For KARE 11 Investigates, I'm AJ Legault.
Well, much of the anger directed at police in Minneapolis has been simmering for years, with members of the community saying the department hasn't done enough to crack down on excessive force. And as investigative reporter Lauren Lemanchik found, citizen complaints almost never led to discipline.
No justice, no peace.
The anger explodes. A powder keg sparked by the death of George Floyd.
That could have been me.
But kindled, advocates say, by a years-long lack of accountability within the Minneapolis Police Department.
It is no wonder that people say that the Minneapolis Police Department is out of control.
KARE 11 obtained police complaint data from the city, which shows officers are almost never disciplined. Of nearly 1,500 actionable complaints since 2015, just 29 resulted in discipline against officers. That's just 2%. By the city's definition, discipline can include just a written reprimand. Of the total, just 5 complaints resulted in officers being fired.
A spokesman for the city defended the number, saying some of those complaints were for minor offenses like speeding, which aren't eligible for discipline, and instead referred for coaching.
Is that system sufficient to ensure the trust of the citizens of Minneapolis?
No, I don't think so.
Ken Rance served on the Minneapolis Civilian Police Conduct Review Panel and says the system for officer accountability needs to be overhauled.
You know, there are a lot of inner workings behind the scenes that can make it very challenging for disciplinary action to take place.
Not even officers with multiple complaints face discipline. Documents show Derek Chauvin, who was charged in George Floyd's murder, had 17 prior complaints in his career, just one resulting in a reprimand back in 2007. In just the past 8 years, 5 officers had 16 or more complaints against them. None were disciplined.
Many times it's very discouraging when, reviewing, a case and you see that this officer has, has hurt people, has broken the law. And to see that there was no action taken place prior to.
Is that a sign that they're not taking these complaints seriously?
In my mind, it's certainly a red flag.
David Harris, a national expert on police discipline, says Minneapolis's numbers are low.
If they wanted to improve who they are and what they do, the way they serve people, they would be finding a larger number of complaints sustained.
A missed opportunity, he says, to weed out bad cops.
We know that this is a hard job. We know that it can be dangerous at times. But we also know that not everybody belongs in it.
Advocates say they've been warning about similar data for years.
Frankly, we have found that nobody cares.
After a week that's shaken our city, they wonder if their voices have now been heard.
We reached out to the Minneapolis Police Officers Federation for comment. They did not respond. For KARE 11 Investigates, I'm Lauren Lemanchek.
Well, Minnesota officials are blaming the worst of the rioting on outsiders. We asked our investigative unit to find out if the arrest records available so far show that pattern. Here's AJ Legault.
I think our best estimate right now that I heard is about 20% is what we think are Minnesotans, and about 80% are outside.
Governor Walz and others are saying the violence last night was overwhelmingly due to outsiders. But when KARE 11 checked public records, the log of suspects booked into Hennepin County Jail as of 11 o'clock this morning for rioting, unlawful assembly, and burglary-related crimes since Friday, we found a different story. 86 arrests, of them only 5 listed out-of-state addresses. Although a Minneapolis police spokesperson says he suspects some people are giving false addresses. Another claim that white nationalists may be behind some of the violence.
We have seen things like white supremacist organizers who have posted things on platforms about coming to Minnesota.
That concern fueled in part by this image posted to YouTube of a white man, his face covered and carrying an umbrella, smashing windows at the AutoZone earlier this week. Of the 5 people arrested from out of state, KARE 11 found one of them had a Facebook page suggesting links to white supremacy. We've also received data from the St. Paul police that appears to contradict that narrative that the majority of the violence is being caused by people from outside the state. Of the 18 people arrested from Thursday through Saturday morning, 12 listed Minnesota as their address. 2 were from Dakota, 1 was from Wisconsin, and another was from Texas. For KARE 11 Investigates, I'm AJ Legault.
What if a teenage girl hadn't recorded the death of George Floyd? It's a question that's being asked again and again. And although officers had body cameras, KARE 11 Investigates Lauren Lemanchek finds the body camera video rarely sees the light of day.
By now, the images have been seared into the public consciousness, but the cell phone that captured George Floyd's final minutes wasn't the only camera at 38th and Chicago on Memorial Day. Each of these 4 officers was wearing a body camera, and phone records show at the 911 center.
But we have the cameras up for 320's call.
A dispatcher was watching a closed-circuit camera.
All of them set on this man.
So far, police have not released any of that video. And if not for a teenage girl's cell phone, we might not even know about it.
If a civilian hadn't recorded that cell phone video, would anyone have ever seen that body cam video?
It's very unlikely that anyone from the public would have seen it.
Abigail Serra is an attorney who also sits on the Minneapolis Police Conduct Oversight Commission.
So it would require an individual to know that this event happened and that it would be necessary to make that kind of request for that data. And frankly, if that cell phone video hadn't gone viral, virtually no one would have known that this took place or what happened.
That's because the initial public release from Minneapolis police described Floyd's death as a medical incident during a police interaction. No mention of restraint or use of force.
And even if someone from the public or the media would have made a request for that video, the law gets tricky.
It says the video is not public data unless it documents the discharge of a firearm by a police officer or the use of force that results in substantial bodily harm. George Floyd's case clearly fits that bill, but that's not the final word.
So there are lots of ways that you can be told no.
First Amendment attorney Lita Walker says there's another big exception.
And so what we're seeing is that police departments tend to rely on the argument that this body camera footage is part of an ongoing investigation,
meaning it can stay private until the investigation ends. Hennepin County Chief Public Defender Mary Moriarty says her lawyers often obtain video on behalf of clients that concerns them.
They constantly see police officers putting their knees in our clients' necks and backs and verbally harassing them. And so that behavior is not uncommon from what we observe in body cam.
But by court order, even defense attorneys can't make the video public unless it's introduced at trial. So often, it too stays hidden.
Now we have visual evidence of it. But then there has to be accountability.
In case after case across the country, video going public has meant the difference in whether a case is prosecuted or not. Remember Laquan McDonald in Chicago, shot 16 times by police? There was no discipline for a year until journalists sued for this police video. After it was released, an officer was charged and later convicted of murder. Would that have happened in the case of Derek Chauvin? No one knows. But advocates say it's another example of why the public needs more access.
If we want to have any level of oversight, any level of civic participation in policing, we're going to need a lot more transparency.
Chief Medaria Arredondo was asked if he thought anyone would know about this case without that cell phone video. He didn't really answer, but says he was thankful it was recorded the way it was. And he said citizens should absolutely feel comfortable recording in the future. For KARE 11 Investigates, I'm Lauren Lemanchek.
We have two KARE 11 investigations tonight. The first involves veterans. Is the VA putting their lives at risk by encouraging them to get exams with private contractors during the pandemic? A new lawsuit says it is. Here's investigative reporter AJ Legault.
They wanted you to go into New York City right now to get an examination.
Yeah, and so I said, I can't do that. For obvious reasons.
This Army veteran, who asked we not use his name, lives in Connecticut. He has a benefits claim pending with the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. He says a VA contractor called him and said he needed to attend a compensation exam in person next week in New York City.
Definitely, not doing that.
It's an unnecessary risk. It's not just risky, there is no reason for the risk.
Harold Hoffman is a veteran himself and an attorney with the Veterans Legal Advocacy Group. He just filed this lawsuit asking the United States Court of Appeals for Veterans Claims to order the VA to stop performing in-person exams immediately for veterans in coronavirus hotspots.
Honestly, we think it's pretty tone deaf that they're sending at-risk veterans to at-risk places at this moment when they could just wait a few months.
The VA closed its 56 regional benefits offices, including St. Paul's, to the public on March 19th in response to COVID-19. So veterans question why they're still being sent to see private contractors for exams that are not medical emergencies.
Especially when, everything else has changed to, adapt with coronavirus. Why would they not? Why wouldn't the VA adapt to continue to help veterans?
The VA has not responded to KARE 11's request for comment. For KARE 11 Investigates, I'm AJ Legault.
Well, the Department of Veterans Affairs has stopped sending veterans into harm's way during the coronavirus outbreak. It comes in the wake of a KARE 11 investigation. Here's AJ Legault with the update.
Accept social distancing as a requirement for the next number of weeks.
That's Dr. Richard Stone, the Veterans Health Administration executive in charge, in a March 31st video asking veterans to not come to VA hospitals unless absolutely necessary.
I'm asking you to consider telemedicine for your visit.
But a KARE 11 investigation discovered the VA wasn't practicing what it preached. As of Friday, April 3rd, veterans were still being ordered to attend in-person pension exams at private contractors or risk having their benefits denied.
I was told that I had to show up, and the way the VA system works is if you don't show up for your appointment, the VA is entitled to automatically deny your claim. So I didn't have a choice.
Tom West, an Army National Guard veteran from Virginia, went to that pension exam April 1st, and he's severely immune compromised.
You're high risk for coronavirus. I'm high risk for any kind of infection.
This Connecticut veteran was told he needed to go into the epicenter of the nation's coronavirus crisis this week.
They wanted you to go into New York City right now to get an examination.
Yeah, and so I said, I can't do that for obvious reasons.
Honestly, we think it's pretty tone deaf that they're sending at-risk veterans to at-risk places.
Harold Hoffman is an attorney with the Veterans Legal Advocacy Group. He filed a lawsuit Thursday asking a federal court to order VA to stop performing in-person benefits exams immediately.
It's an unnecessary risk. It's not just risky, there is no reason for the risk.
Here's investigative reporter AJ Legault.
KARE 11 began asking questions and published a report Friday morning. That same day, the agency ordered an about face, directing vendors to immediately stop holding in-person examinations in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Over the weekend,
Calling about your appointment you have with us on the 9th of April.
veterans in Minnesota and across the country tell KARE 11 the phone calls,
That appointment has been canceled.
and texts poured in, stating due to coronavirus, VA has ordered QTC to postpone in-clinic exams until further notice. QTC is a private business with multi-billion-dollar-a-year contracts with the VA to do benefits exams. They changed their website over the weekend to state, per the VA order, they're postponing all in-clinic exams until further notice.
That decision is going to end up saving some people's lives.
For KARE 11 Investigates, I'm AJ Legault.
Tonight, a KARE 11 investigation with national implications. Veterans denied benefits for not showing up to exams that the VA itself canceled due to the pandemic. Here's investigative reporter AJ Legault.
Was in Beirut in '83 when the headquarters got blown up.
4 years in the Marines, another 17 in the Army.
Iraq for 16 months as a hazardous response team leader for all of Baghdad.
Harry Payne's service impacted him in ways he's still discovering.
I distance myself from everybody.
His private doctor told him he has all the classic symptoms.
PTSD, combat-related PTSD.
He recently applied for VA benefits, but strangely, was denied.
And then you read the reason why, and I get even madder because it's just flat out lie.
The VA decision letter informing him of his denial acknowledges he's been diagnosed with a disability and even concedes it's related to combat. So, why denied? The letter states, we received notification from QTC Medical Services that you declined to participate in the examination process for your claim.
I in no way refused to cooperate.
Harry was scheduled to be examined by VA contractor QTC on April 21st. But before that could happen, this news.
Well, the Department of Veterans Affairs has stopped sending veterans into harm's way during the coronavirus outbreak. It comes in the wake of a KARE 11 investigation.
KARE 11's investigation had exposed VA forcing veterans who were supposed to be sheltering at home to go to exams or risk having their benefits denied.
They wanted you to go into New York City right now to get an examination.
Yeah, and so I said, I can't do that for obvious reasons.
The VA did an about face, directing vendors to immediately stop holding in-person examinations in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Nationwide, veterans like Harry got calls like this.
That appointment has been canceled.
They told you it's canceled, and then they sent a letter to the VA saying you refused to cooperate.
That's correct.
There are some roads a veteran should not be forced to walk alone.
I'll do some poking around, see what we come up with here.
Sounds good.
KARE 11 began questioning Veterans Affairs, QTC, and Congress.
It shouldn't be happening.
U.S. Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia sits on the Veterans Affairs Oversight Committee.
How does that make sense?
Not to anybody. From a grade school on up, it doesn't make any sense. It's ridiculous to do that to them.
VA sent KARE 11 a statement, which says in part, VBA erred in the processing of this claim. We have retrained the staff involved in this incident. A QTC spokesman told KARE 11 they never messaged the VA that Harry declined to participate, but they've worked closely with the VA and have verified that no other claimants were affected. It appears the veteran you cited was an anomaly. However, KARE 11 discovered Harry is not alone. Members of Congress have been hearing from veterans who had the exact same thing happen to them. Manchin and other senators sent this letter last week telling VA Secretary Robert Wilkie his department must issue clear guidance so veterans are not needlessly confused or harmed during this unprecedented time. After KARE 11 began asking questions, a VA employee called Harry to apologize.
And evidently your decision was canceled in error.
Correct.
Denied in error. And I apologize for the confusion.
His benefits claim was reopened and he was given an exam via video conference the very next day. 2 days later, his disability claim was approved.
I was like, man, that's quick. I couldn't believe how fast the whole process went once you brought this to light.
Meanwhile, Congress is vowing to get to the bottom of what's happening, even if they need to call VA Secretary Wilkie in for a hearing.
This will be taken care of immediately because we're very much concerned.
For KARE 11 Investigates, I'm AJ Legault.
If you are a veteran who received one of those denials during the pandemic, our investigative team would like to hear from you. Send us an email to investigations@kare11.com.
Well, despite warnings of delays and confusion, the Department of Veterans Affairs made a major policy change amid the COVID pandemic. Now, as AJ Legault tells us, a KARE 11 investigation finds it contributed to thousands of veterans being wrongly denied benefits.
In the halls of power in the nation's capital,
the VA incorrectly reported a veteran as a no-show for a disability exam.
A problem KARE 11's investigation exposed, discussed during a congressional forum.
We should not allow a single veteran's claim to fall through the cracks during this pandemic.
But that is exactly what we discovered VA allowed to happen to veterans like Marine Ben Juarez.
Oh, definitely. I mean, it's you're kind of lost in the sauce now.
Ben had a pending benefits claim. Records show he was scheduled to attend a medical exam with a private VA contractor, QTC, on April 7th. But before that could happen, this news.
Well, the Department of Veterans Affairs has stopped sending veterans into harm's way during the coronavirus outbreak. It comes in the wake of a KARE 11 investigation.
KARE 11's investigation had exposed VA forcing veterans who were supposed to be sheltering at home to go to exams or risk having their benefits denied.
They wanted you to go into New York City right now to get an explanation.
Yeah, and so I said, I can't do that for obvious reasons.
The VA did an about face. Nationwide, veterans like Ben got calls like this.
That appointment has been canceled.
They were canceling all appointments until further notice due to coronavirus.
But then this letter came in the mail. Benefits denied. Why? It says because he missed the VA exam.
Did you miss that exam?
Oh, I missed it because they told me not to attend it.
This VFW rep told Congress it's happening a lot.
In many cases, veterans were reported as no-shows, even where the contractors themselves canceled the exam.
For the past 2 months, we've been asking why. Why and how was the VA making and not catching such obvious mistakes? Turns out it's tied, in part, to a controversial move VA made in the midst of the pandemic to cut veterans advocates out of the loop on benefits decisions.
Losing our opportunity to engage with VA and fix errors that could have been easily fixed earlier in the process.
Ron Quaddy is the Director of Claims and Field Operations for the Minnesota Department of Veterans Affairs, the local state agency that helps veterans navigate the complex VA claims process. In April, VA ended a decades-old practice of allowing veterans representatives and attorneys 48 hours to review benefits decisions for accuracy before decisions are finalized.
The 48-hour review is extremely important. On a regular basis, we find even simple errors that we can help the VA with.
In letters to VA Secretary Robert Wilkie and even President Trump, veteran service agencies warned that canceling the review period was a big mistake, in essence, preventing correctable errors from being resolved. The VA did it anyway. And veterans like Ben began receiving benefits denials with obvious mistakes.
It's just kind of frustrating because you have to go back to, almost feels like you have to go to the back of the line and restart all over again.
Now you tell me, that doesn't even make sense. And that's what we say, come on.
U.S. Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia spoke with KARE 11 last month and made this promise.
We'll get this corrected. I really believe we will.
He and a group of other senators then introduced a bill to require the 48-hour review period be reinstated. KARE 11 flagged Ben's case to Congress and the VA. His wrongful denial was overturned and his claim reopened.
I'm pretty sure I'm not the only veteran that has been going through this dilemma.
He's right. Congressional sources briefed on the situation tell KARE 11 18 1,000 claims were denied during the pandemic due to what the VA labeled missed exams. The VA is going to start reviewing those claims for accuracy next week. For KARE 11 Investigates, I'm AJ Legault.
Tonight, a KARE 11 investigation discovers police agencies skipping a basic safety precaution, not ensuring the masks they're giving their officers to protect them during the COVID pandemic actually work. Here's investigative reporter AJ Legault.
Union Depot in St. Paul. A man walks down the sidewalk coughing repeatedly. Back up the video and you'll see the sick-sounding man had just been in close contact with a pair of Metro Transit police officers who'd responded to reports of a man defecating in public. To protect their officers during the COVID pandemic, Metro Transit issued a personal protective equipment policy and N95 masks to their officers, telling them when boarding a train or bus, they should always wear the N95. Also, when they have someone in custody in their vehicle. But our investigation found Metro Transit skipped an important step meant to protect officers using the N95 masks, a step safety experts say is critical.
Terribly important. The fit testing is what gives you this indication of, what is fitting properly for your particular facial features.
Bill Stewart is an occupational safety specialist with the Minnesota Safety Council. You can see the fit testing he mentioned in this video by the N95 mask manufacturer, Minnesota-based 3M. A plastic hood is put over a person wearing an N95, and scented aerosol is pumped in.
If the fit test is completed without the subject detecting the sweet taste of the test solution, an adequate face seal has been demonstrated.
The masks, also called respirators, come in different sizes. A bad fit means a bad seal, rendering the mask ineffective.
If it's not fitting right, it's not going to work right?
No, if it doesn't fit correctly, it doesn't filter the air as you would expect it to.
How important is it? Even as OSHA relaxed standards during the coronavirus emergency, they still require employers to perform initial fit tests to protect against COVID-19. Their rule states initial fit testing is essential to determine if the respirator properly fits the worker and is capable of providing the expected level of protection.
For every call, every medical that we go to, our officers are donned with the N95s. And that's our protocol going forward.
Lieutenant Andy Knott says the Anoka Sheriff's Department issued N95s thinking something was better than nothing. They're scrambling this week to get everyone fit tested.
For protection of our employees and the public as well.
St. Paul Police reports fit testing all officers, but that's not the case everywhere. The Minneapolis Police Department said they're not fit testing. The Hennepin County Sheriff's Department says they're not sure if all deputies have been fit tested. The Ramsey County Sheriff's Department didn't answer our question directly, stating staff are working to form fit the masks to ensure proper sealing. And Metro Transit wrote, we have not been fit testing because of the constrained supply chain. We felt that it was most prudent to preserve our inventory. However, under OSHA's current COVID-19 rules, N95s used for fit testing can be reused. So fit testing does not really affect inventory.
Initial fit testing is a requirement. So there is no excuse for not following the standard here.
For KARE 11 Investigates, I'm AJ Legault.
A new KARE 11 investigation tonight into Minnesota's most vulnerable. Many are struggling to get care as the nation's bailout for unemployed workers results in a financial incentive for some critical employees to stay home. Here's investigative reporter AJ Legault.
Honestly, we've been in crisis for a long time, and this is just the cherry.
The cherry for Lauren Thompson, who is quadriplegic with spastic cerebral palsy, is the effect COVID-19 has had on her ability to get a personal care assistant, or PCA, to help her with basic needs.
And so I need a PCA to get me up, get me dressed, get me showered.
The 31-year-old is currently living with her mom, Cheryl, who, due to a bad back and neck, struggles to lift and care for her daughter.
How has this COVID pandemic affected the ability to get PCA care?
Great question. We've tried to get some PCAs in here. One person was in for a little while and stopped coming.
So that means that I can't take a shower.
Lauren's not alone. In Minnesota, roughly 28,000 people, young and old, rely on PCAs for critical help with daily living.
When I say critical, that, I truly mean life, health, safety.
Roberta Opheim is Minnesota's ombudsman for mental health and developmental disabilities. She says because of the pandemic, that PCA care, which can be a matter of life and death, is not always happening.
We are seeing and hearing complaints of people not getting their services.
Ask anyone in Minnesota's disability community, and they'll tell you there was a major PCA staffing shortage before the COVID pandemic. Now, there's a crisis, fueled in part by the government's attempt to help unemployment.
And we were doing the math. They'd make much more on unemployment with the extra $600 bonus than they would doing this job.
Needed workers making more money to stay home. Is that really happening? We checked state unemployment data, which shows between March 16th and April 18th, 1,933 PCAs applied for unemployment.
We have had some workers now stop working, saying it's COVID related and filed for unemployment.
Andre Best is CEO of Best Care, an agency that employs PCAs. He and other PCA agency owners tell KARE 11 they're seeing PCAs purposefully go on unemployment because with a new federal $600 a week added to regular unemployment benefits, it's more lucrative than working.
It's a disincentive if you can make more money not working than working.
Best says they'd like to pay their employees better, but in Minnesota, it's a rate-controlled system. The state reimbursement rate for PCA services is $17.80 an hour. After employer taxes and overhead, PCA agencies typically pay employees just the union-contracted $13.25 an hour.
The margins are very thin.
Thin margins, but high stakes.
This is life and death.
GOP State Senator Jim Abler has introduced an emergency funding bill that, if passed, would provide a 15% bonus to encourage PCAs to come to work during the COVID emergency.
If the PCA doesn't come to some of these people, they will die. And we can't let that happen.
It's not just about the money. A lack of protective equipment like masks and gloves has both PCAs and the clients they care for concerned about the risks of workers coming and going from people's homes. And this is a job where social distancing is impossible. Factor it all together, and for Minnesota's most vulnerable, COVID-19 is exposing them to risks beyond the virus itself.
It's had a direct impact on your life, though.
Yes. Yeah. Yep. PCA care always does.
For KARE 11 Investigates, I'm AJ Legault.
Do you have workers that are transporting people in their vehicles with no wipes to even wipe it down afterwards?
That's correct.
While the nation's hospitals are dealing with severe and widespread shortages of supplies, a KARE 11 investigation discovers the shortages of masks and sanitizers is also hampering the ability of Minnesota child protection workers to adequately protect themselves and the often vulnerable families they serve. Here's investigative reporter AJ Legault.
While most of Minnesota shelters in place, there are some jobs where that's just not possible.
Are you doing any face-to-face meetings right now?
Yes. It's a critical part of our jobs.
Sarah Croteau works for Hennepin County's Indian Child Welfare Unit.
We're still going out in the field and doing face-to-face direct work with families.
Do you have a mask?
No, I don't.
Sarah's story is not uncommon. Emails obtained by KARE 11 show the president of the union representing Hennepin Human Services workers wrote on March 31st, "Our frontline workers are being sent out into the field without protective gear, masks, gloves, sanitizer, and wipes. This is an outrage." It also talks about some of the supplies they do have being expired or inadequate. For example, when employees rated their bed bug kits for sanitation supplies, it turned out they were, quote, very old, so all the Purells and wipes were quite expired.
Is that acceptable?
It's absolutely not acceptable.
Grace Boltich is the union president who wrote that email. If an endangered child needs to be removed from a home, child protection workers transport them in their own cars. The state has issued new guidelines for child safety workers during the COVID-19 pandemic. They include clean and disinfect your home, car, and workspace with alcohol or bleach-based products often.
You're saying that's not happening?
That's correct. They have not been receiving adequate supplies, any supplies really, to be able to sanitize their vehicle, the car seat if they're using one to transport a child.
We're working as fast as we can to really reach some of those issues that we know have been out there.
Dan Rogan is Assistant Hennepin County Administrator for Operations. He says over the past week, the county has ordered more than $2 million worth of PPE, but the arrival date keeps getting pushed back. Unable to find sanitizer wipes, he says they've begun issuing sprays and dry paper towels to wipe down cars.
We're going to be in the process this week, we hope, of supplying all of our child protection workers with one or more cloth masks that they'll be able to wear.
Masks or not, child protection workers say their job is so important they can't just stop because of COVID-19.
But at the same time, it's worrying about myself and my coworkers and our safety as we go out into the field and have to do these home visits.
For KARE 11 Investigates, I'm AJ Legault.
Well, tonight our KARE 11 Investigates team is following the money from that massive federal pandemic stimulus bill. And as AJ Legault reports, some small airports are cashing in big on taxpayer dollars.
It still puts a smile on my face.
At the Brainerd Lakes Regional Airport, home to just 2 commercial flights a day, there are nearly 18 million reasons for airport director Steve Wright to have a smile on his face.
Were you expecting any sort of windfall like this?
No.
But the source of Brainerd's excitement has many in the aviation industry scratching their heads.
Whoa, Brainerd's got $18 million and, Bemidji's got $1. And what happened?
Longtime airport consultant Mark Sixel tracks airport finances. He says it was necessary for Congress to include funding for airports in the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security CARES Act. But here's the issue. Small Minnesota airports like Bemidji, St. Cloud, Hibbing, and International Falls are all receiving about $1 million in taxpayer grants. Rochester 2.4 and Duluth 5 million. Then there's Brainerd, awarded nearly $18 million.
What the heck is going on?
That's the multi-million-dollar question. The FAA used a formula to decide how airports nationwide divvied up the much-needed stimulus cash, says Cassandra Isaacson, Director of Aeronautics for MnDOT.
That money was critically needed for airports.
The formula is spelled out in FAA records. It weighed passenger boardings per year, airport debt, and cash on hand, all designed to ensure airports can keep their lights on, pay employees, and their debts as the pandemic ravages the industry.
It's absolutely critical.
But Sixel says he discovered a flaw in the formula. Some airports, like Brainerd, with no debt and a little cash in the bank, skewed the FAA data.
I was always told when I start, smell your data. You got to make sure your data smells correct before you send it out. I don't know that anybody at FAA ever looked at it.
We asked the FAA for an interview. They refused, but a spokesperson did tell me the FAA does not believe their formula was flawed. But just look, at MSP, they're receiving $125 million. That equals $6 per passenger in a year, enough to cover their operating expenses for 7 months. Compare that to Brainerd. Their $18 million works out to $807 per passenger, enough to fund their current operating budget for more than 18 years. Some other small Midwest airports are getting a windfall too. Mason City, Iowa is getting enough to last 29 years. Devil's Lake Regional Airport in North Dakota, enough to last 50 years.
They just took these ratios, somebody above said, let's get this out the door, and there it went.
A congressman from Tennessee has called on the FAA to suspend its CARES Act payments to airports immediately until Congress can address this severe funding flaw. In response to criticism, the FAA moved to cap the initial awards to approximately 4 years' worth of operating expenses. But airports like Brainerd can still apply to get the rest and use it on capital improvement projects. Brainerd's airport director says, on the bright side, the windfall means they won't be hitting up local taxpayers anytime soon.
We will never have to be dependent on a local tax levy dollar.
Never?
If we plan this right, yes.
For KARE 11 Investigates, I'm AJ Legault.
The Minnesota airports are receiving $158 million total. Nationwide, 3,200 airports are getting a combined $10 billion in CARES Act funding. You can look into the data and the FAA records behind this report for yourself in this story on KARE11.com.
Well, with all the news about nationwide shortages of equipment to protect doctors and nurses, we had our KARE 11 investigative team look into what's happening right now in Minnesota hospitals. Lou Raguse reports that the shortages are already forcing changes at hospitals that have frontline medical workers concerned.
So I got these goggles.
Protecting herself from the coronavirus takes some innovation for Twin Cities ER doctor Amy Cho.
Instead of a surgical mask to protect the N95 from droplets, or a mask like this.
Dr. Cho now wears a face shield to extend the life of her N95 respirator mask, the mask that offers the best protection for doctors and nurses while treating patients infected with the coronavirus. That, as Twin Cities hospitals have already begun rationing personal protective equipment, or PPE.
How real is this equipment shortage concern?
It's an enormous concern for us.
For example, shortages of those special N95 masks.
As nurses, we're trained that the masks are one-time use.
Twin Cities nurse Kelly Honest says now nurses use the same masks to treat multiple patients, sometimes even keeping the mask in a paper bag instead of throwing it away during breaks. KARE 11 Investigates obtained internal PPE guidance given to staff at Abbott Northwestern, telling them to only use N95 masks for procedures like intubation that definitely put the virus into the air. But providers are worried that the virus is airborne in other patient contexts too. Just a month ago, they say reusing a mask would have been against guidelines.
There's concern that what is being presented as appropriate PPE, that those recommendations are being made based on the knowledge of the supply chain and the supply of the equipment, not based on what is truly adequate or best.
Is there a glove shortage as well? A patient being tested for COVID-19 at a Health Partners clinic in Plymouth sent us this video showing techs using hand sanitizer on their gloves instead of replacing them after each test.
I mean, you do realize that, like, if I have the flu and they have COVID, now you probably exposed me to COVID, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you want, I'll go and change gloves, but that's what we've been instructed to just
okay, yeah.
Sanitizer for gloves.
The FDA says hand sanitizer may degrade hospital gloves. Health Partners tells us their techs are supposed to replace them each time. Dr. Cho and Nurse Honest worry about new PPE guidelines resulting in doctors and nurses in Minnesota getting sick and how resulting staff shortages could cripple the healthcare system.
We love our jobs. We're good at our jobs. We've been well trained to do our jobs and we're ready to do them, but we need to be kept safe so that we can do them.
For KARE 11 Investigates, I'm Lou Raguse.
Nurses at M. Fairview hospitals last week voted no confidence against hospital management, saying they were, quote, flagrantly violating their safety in response to coronavirus.
Tonight, our KARE 11 Investigates team looks into a serious shortcoming in Minnesota law exposed by the coronavirus crisis. Price gouging on food and other essential items is illegal in most states, but as AJ Legault reports, not here.
From toilet paper to cough meds, hand sanitizer to bags of rice, KARE 11 viewers have been telling us about skyrocketing prices online and in their local stores, driven by the COVID-19 emergency.
My family ran out of rice.
Bee Vang tells us she drove all over St. Paul looking to buy jasmine rice. Most stores were sold out. She finally found it, selling for double what she normally pays.
Definitely price gouging.
It's a huge problem.
DFL State Representative John Lesh of St. Paul says it's a complaint he's hearing a lot.
You can go to the market 2 blocks down where a bag of rice is selling for 3 or 4 times what it was 2 weeks ago.
Hardware store Menards just got this cease and desist letter from the Michigan Attorney General claiming the stores have engaged in a systemic effort to exploit the public fear about coronavirus, essentially doubling the price on cleaning products like bleach. Here in Minnesota,
the Attorney General's office has gotten reports of price gouging by some retailers of essential items like food, healthcare-related products or food services or medical supplies.
But Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison says there's not much he can do.
Most people don't know that price gouging is not currently illegal in Minnesota.
34 states and D.C. have at least some sort of law against price gouging, according to the website Find Law. But these 16 states, including Minnesota, have no statute specifically outlawing price gouging.
So no, it's legal, unfortunately.
Representative Lesh says it's time to change that. He's one of the authors of a bill to crack down on unconscionably excessive prices during state and national emergencies. Violators would be hit with a $10,000 civil penalty.
It's my hope that we could get this through in the next week or two, and business owners would get the high sign that no, you can't do this, it's illegal.
Until that happens, Minnesotans, unfortunately, you're vulnerable to the spread of COVID-19 fueled greed. For KARE 11 Investigates, I'm AJ Legault.
Well, today the governor took executive action banning price gouging during the COVID-19 emergency. It comes in the wake of a KARE 11 investigation exposing how Minnesota is one of just a few states in the country where the practice is not already illegal. Here's investigative reporter AJ Legault with the update.
My top priority is always the protection and the security of Minnesotans citizens.
Minnesota Governor Tim Walz announcing a crackdown on excessive and opportunistic pricing.
Today I signed an executive order to prohibit price gouging during peacetime emergency.
KARE 11 viewers have been telling us about skyrocketing prices online and in their local stores, from toilet paper to bags of rice selling for double their normal cost. But Minnesota is one of just 16 states where there's no law forbidding price gouging.
We were seeing hand sanitizer average for $60 a bottle. Others were hawking $1 a squirt for hand sanitizer, and these things are real. That's not how we are. Many of them can come from out of state, and this gives the state and the Attorney General the ability to crack down.
You can read the governor's price gouging order for yourself on KARE11.com. For KARE 11 Investigates, I'm AJ Legault.
Well, allegations of pandemic profiteering and consumer complaints about price gouging appear to be everywhere right now. In tonight's KARE 11 investigation, we look into a viewer tip and discover inflated prices sometimes are not what they seem and may actually start higher up than your local store. Here's investigative reporter AJ Legault.
So we got a tip that this gas station across the street is price gouging on hand wipes. We're gonna go in and find out.
Clorox wipes or masks or anything?
Got the mask right here.
They're $3 each?
Yeah.
Do you think that's price gouging?
I don't know about the masks, because I've never seen them anywhere.
You don't know what they normally sell for each?
Got a clue. We don't ever carry them except now.
To answer our own question, we looked online. CVS sold boxes of 50 for $12.49, but they are out of stock. On Amazon, we found them in stock and selling for $31.99. To compare, in order to buy the whole box here at the gas station, it would cost $150.
How much are the hand sanitizers?
These are $3.99, and then this one's $10.99.
$10.99. We found the same brand and size sold at Cub for $1.99. This sure looked like price gouging. But when we got the manager on the phone last week,
you're making about 90 cents a mask.
He said he wasn't price gouging his customers. The inflated prices start higher up the food chain.
That box of face masks again was $87.
To prove his point, he sent KARE 11 invoices from his suppliers showing he paid $1.75 per mask, $87.50 for the whole box. That makes his profit $1.25 per mask, with similar tight markups on the sanitizer. The gas station operator, through his attorney, wrote he believes the business has been and remains compliant with the governor's executive order banning price gouging during the state of emergency.
The problem is dramatic, precipitous increases.
Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison's office tells KARE 11, as of April 1st, they've received more than 600 price gouging complaints and issued more than 20 warning letters.
What are you hearing from some of these retailers who might be saying, look, this is what I'm having to pay for my supplier. They've jacked the prices up 500%.
Well, let me tell you, that's not what we're hearing. But if that's a defense, we want to hear it.
We wanted to know, was the supplier price gouging the gas station? American General Merchandise of Shoreview is the supplier listed on the face mask invoice. It's located in this building with no signage. We asked how much they paid for the masks. The CEO, Abu Bakar Makrami, would not talk with us on camera, but said, we didn't do anything illegal. We're not going to share any information with you because we don't want to damage our relationship with our suppliers. Lesson learned. When it comes to price increases during the pandemic, it can be tough to tell where the buck really stops. For KARE 11 Investigates, I'm AJ Legault.
You have been helping us warn others about those looking to profit off the pandemic. Tonight, we're investigating another case of price gouging that you brought to our attention. Here's AJ Legault.
Can I just ask you, do you think it's fair to sell 4 rolls of toilet paper for $40?
A garage door slams closed on questions in a Phoenix, Arizona suburb. What led to this moment started in South St. Paul, Minnesota.
You think you were the victim of price gouging?
I know I was.
John Stone says, like many of us, he'd gone to the grocery store and found the toilet paper aisle bare.
So I got onto eBay. If you look at that, it looks like it's a pack. But I thought, well, I must be getting a 4-pack.
He placed 4 orders and learned that was a big mistake when he reviewed his receipt.
I was getting 4 single rolls of toilet paper, each one costing me $10. And to add insult to injury, I looked on my PayPal account and realized I was also being charged an additional $20 for shipping.
That's $60 for 4 rolls of toilet paper.
We're not talking about small price increases, reasonable, justifiable price increases. We're talking about pandemic profiteering.
Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison has begun cracking down after Governor Walz signed an executive order banning excessive and opportunistic pricing. That move came in the wake of a KARE 11 investigation revealing Minnesota is one of just 16 states in the country where the practice was not already illegal. Ironically, Arizona is one of the others. Ellison's office just sent a warning letter to Menards about potential price gouging violations and took action against this downtown St. Paul smoke shop for a number of price gouging overcharges, including selling toilet paper for $2.99 a roll.
We're just seeing people who see an opportunity and are trying to take advantage of a situation.
Feeling taken advantage of, John turned to eBay, asking to cancel his purchase, but says he was told it was too late. It had already shipped March 16th. Frustrated and resigned, John kept checking his mail, watching. More than a week passed. The toilet paper never arrived.
I'm still waiting.
He wrote KARE 11 Investigates. We looked into it and found a shipping label was created March 16th, but nothing shipped. We tracked the eBay seller, Cubs 1 2016, back to this Arizona home and asked a reporter from our sister station in Phoenix to swing by.
We're doing a story about people selling goods online like toilet paper for really high prices. Can we ask you about the sales that you've made?
No.
Can I just ask you, do you think it's fair to sell 4 rolls of toilet paper for $40?
The seller did respond by email claiming he'd paid $200 for 16 rolls of toilet paper and was just trying to recover some of his money, but then didn't ship it because he felt bad. In the end, he promised to cancel the order and refund the money. For John, TP rolls getting thin. The search starts over.
We're good for a week.
For KARE 11 Investigates, I'm AJ Legault.
Senator Klobuchar is also getting involved. She co-authored a bill to protect consumers from outrageous prices. She's asking the FTC to take action and working with the state's attorney generals.
The attorney generals in the country are uniting to try to take this on, and I think we should have more tools at the state and federal level. No one should be profiting off of other people's misery right now.
KARE 11 reached out to both Menards and the smoke shop. The smoke shop did not respond. Menards tells KARE 11 they're studying the Attorney General's letter and will comply with his directives.
The coronavirus has thrown open the floodgates to scams, price gouging, and pandemic profiteering. But as KARE 11 investigates discovered, it's also creating opportunities for Minnesotans to show kindness and love for neighbors in need. Here's AJ Legault.
What is all this behind you?
This was a surprise.
Normally when your house gets TP'd, it's not the good kind of surprise. But for John Stone,
This helps a lot.
last Friday, KARE 11 Investigates shared John's story, thinking he was buying packs of toilet paper on eBay for nearly $10 each.
If you look at that, it looks like it's a pack.
He later found out he'd bought single rolls. And to add insult to injury, the seller never shipped them. So KARE 11 tracked the eBay merchant to a home outside Phoenix and asked a reporter with our sister station there to swing by.
Can I just ask you, do you think it's fair to sell 4 rolls of toilet paper for $40?
That closed door led to open hearts back in South St. Paul.
I didn't think that someone would break open a multi-pack and sell them off one at a time. I also didn't think that people would stop by with multi-packs and just give them to us. And I would open up the door and they said, we saw you on TV.
It happened 3 times. 2 strangers and the local fire department came knocking.
They didn't want thanks. They didn't want credit. They just wanted to be neighbors.
John and his wife have a little free library and crafting box to give away art supplies for neighborhood kids. They're now adding to that in case other families find themselves in need.
What we don't want to do is take someone else's generosity and hold it on for ourselves.
With a story of kindness during COVID,
Pay it forward is the idea.
AJ Legault, KARE 11 Investigates.
More than 80% of the 534 deaths so far were people living in long-term care or assisted living centers. One of those facilities has now been cited by the state for its conditions before an outbreak that claimed the lives of at least 47 residents. Cantor Dahl and Brandon Stahl explain the disturbing findings.
On April 14th, 89-year-old Judah Priestler died of COVID-19 inside St. Therese of New Hope with no family by her side.
That's the hardest thing, that you just can't be there with them and hold their hand.
Gabriella Sikic says nearly a month later, her grief is mixed with anger over how her mother's death and dozens more from COVID have been handled. KARE 11 has obtained a newly filed report from the Minnesota Department of Health citing St. Therese for deficient infection control. On April 14th, the same day Judah Priestler died and many other residents battled COVID, state investigators found violations that, quote, had the potential to affect all residents, staff, and visitors residing in the facility. The report cites 2 issues with staff both failing to doff or remove gowns before leaving the rooms of COVID patients and later improperly disposing of them. In one case, a physical therapy assistant was also not wearing eye protection in the room. In another, a nursing assistant walked into another patient's room before washing his hands and forearms. The report says staff also told investigators they didn't have the proper training to prevent infection from spreading in the home. The nursing home administrator denied that allegation. When KARE 11 asked for comment on the inspection, St. Therese CEO Barb Rode responded, "We have addressed the issue, which was relatively low level, that there was just one in a detailed inspection of a 258-bed skilled nursing home battling an invisible and sometimes fatal virus is a credit to our committed staff, which is working very hard under trying conditions to protect and care for our residents."
Shame on them. 47 residents died in 2 weeks. They did not have the proper controls in place. These are also people I knew when I went to visit her, and they're all gone. I'm sorry.
Though the state is now pledging more outside support for long-term care facilities and mandatory testing through a new battle plan, Gabriella says the damage is done.
It's too late. In these facilities, these residents are so close to one another. It was a petri dish for the COVID. It's just too late.
Kent Erdahl, KARE 11 News.
Well, this is the third time in 4 years that St. Therese has been cited for inadequate infection control.
There is no question that COVID-19 has ravaged long-term care facilities. More than 80% of our deaths in our state have occurred in those buildings. And yet the state has refused to release information about how many cases at each facility with outbreaks until now. Investigative reporter Lauren Lemanchek has the story.
The clusters of cases at Northridge Health and Rehab and St. Therese, both in New Hope, made headlines for the shockingly high numbers. According to state data, between the two facilities, 376 residents have tested positive for COVID-19. 57 deaths at Northridge, 67 at St. Therese. A tragedy for each family.
It's a nightmare that we live through hour by hour.
Those are the state's biggest outbreaks, but they're far from the only ones. The state had refused to release specific case counts at facilities. But under pressure from Senator KARE and Housley, those numbers are now available.
People need to know. This is information that we want to know about our loved ones in facilities. We want to know when can we see our parents. We want to know which facilities have COVID. We want to know which facilities they were discharging hospitals to.
The data shows 19 facilities have had more than 50 reported cases. These 11 facilities have had 15 or more deaths. Skilled nursing homes had the largest share of the more than 900 deaths, but more assisted living facilities have had outbreaks.
It's frustrating it took so long.
Chris Sundberg of Elder Voice Family Advocates has been requesting this data for months.
Families need to know because they need to make decisions that impact the care that their loved one gets.
But there's still more information being kept from the public. MDH has inspected every nursing home and assisted living facilities with outbreaks for COVID compliance. But only the nursing home data is public, not assisted living.
Why should that be kept secret?
We asked the health department why it took so long to release this information that families have been begging for. They said they've tried to balance patient privacy with public information. Now we have published the list of facilities and how many cases and deaths they've had on our website, KARE11.com. For KARE 11 Investigates, I'm Lauren Lemanchek.
Nurses at one Minneapolis hospital say their lives were put at risk because of expired equipment. N95 masks so out of date they broke in the middle of caring for patients. KARE 11 Investigates. Lauren Lemanchek explains.
For nurses at Hennepin County Medical Center, one of the critical things that stands between them and COVID-19 is the N95 respirator. The masks in short supply, reserved for the riskiest cases. But nurse Sarah Simons says the ones the hospital provided to them had a flaw.
These masks that came out of storage had such old rubber bands to them that they broke and crumbled when people would stretch them to put on their heads.
How old were these masks?
They were dated 2001.
2001. That's despite manufacturer 3M's warning that the model has a shelf life of just 5 years.
So they were expired by more than a decade.
Oh, yes.
OSHA records confirm what Sarah says. After complaints were filed, the investigation found due to respirator shortages, Hennepin Healthcare System deployed its cache of expired 3M respirators to most inpatient units on March 21st. The investigation found 3 documented cases of elastic bands breaking while staff was wearing them. 2 of those breaks occurred in patient rooms where the patient was either COVID-19 positive or under COVID-19 investigation. And Hennepin Healthcare suspects there have been other cases where the masks broke. Sarah says it added to nurses' anxiety.
They talked at length about how they felt that they were left in a dangerous situation.
How long did that situation last? Records show after 3 weeks of use, HCMC began replacing the original red bands with new blue ones. The problem? Those didn't fit. The new bands were too long, and nurses had to tie knots in them to ensure a proper seal. It wasn't until April 27th that they were out of circulation. That's 5 weeks with expired masks.
This is unacceptable.
Mary Turner, who heads up the nurses union, says an ill-fitting or broken mask is like not having one at all.
Handing a nurse a mask since 2002 That's basically saying, I don't care about you. I don't care whether you live or die.
In HCMC's response to OSHA, they point out the shortages of equipment. A hospital spokeswoman tells KARE 11 they follow the guidance that's provided by the CDC, which does allow for the use of expired N95s when there is a shortage. HCMC says today the old masks are still in use but have new elastic bands. And new masks are also available to the staff.
It's a small step forward in the right direction.
Studies have been done on expired masks, which show they do still work as long as they've been stored according to guidelines and they have a proper seal. As for the PPE status right now, Hennepin Healthcare has expanded the use of N95s, and the state says they have adequate PPE for now. But there's still a need for more as Minnesota prepares for a COVID-19 surge. For KARE 11 Investigates, I'm Lauren Lemanchek.